A chilling wind whispered through the dense forest, rustling the leaves like a warning. The night was moonless, casting the cabin in a shroud of darkness. Inside, John Carson sat alone, his calloused hands wrapped around a mug of stale coffee. The radio crackled with static on the worn-out wooden table, a faint, comforting noise that filled the silence. John took a slow sip, his sharp eyes fixed on the wall where a rack of weapons hung like a shrine to a past life. The green beret emblem glinted in the dim light, a reminder of days long gone. Out here, he was nobody, just a man trying to forget what he used to be. A deep rumble echoed through the forest, reverberating through the ground. John's gaze snapped to the window, his muscles tensing. The sound was wrong, not thunder, not gunfire. It was too rhythmic, too precise. He placed the mug down, its porcelain clink unnaturally loud in the heavy air. Moving to the door, he pressed his ear against it. Silence. But the air felt charged, humming with something he couldn't name. John unlatched the door and stepped outside, the cold biting through his thin flannel shirt. The night smelled of burnt ozone. Then he saw it. A plume of smoke curled skyward from the ridge beyond the trees. Orange and blue flames flickered beneath the treetops, casting eerie shadows. John squinted, his soldier's instincts thrumming to life. That was no plane crash. The angle was too steep, the smoke too thick. Whatever fell from the sky was big, and close. John hurried back inside, grabbing his rifle and a flashlight. The old instincts kicked in, and he checked the weapon with practiced ease, feeling the familiar weight in his hands. He slipped a knife into his boot and tucked a pistol into the back of his waistband. The forest was colder than he remembered as he moved through the underbrush, each step silent and deliberate. Years of recon training made his movements second nature. His breath fogged in the air as he approached the crash site, the scent of burning metal growing stronger. When he crested the ridge, John stopped short. A spacecraft lay embedded in the earth, its hull a sleek, dark metal that glowed with fading blue lights. Smoke and sparks hissed from a jagged tear along its side. The craft was small, barely the size of a pickup truck, its structure organic yet unmistakably mechanical. John swallowed, his grip tightening on the rifle. This was no experimental aircraft. Whatever this was, it wasn't from Earth. Then he heard it, a low, pained moan. John stepped closer, his eyes scanning the wreckage. A figure staggered out from the twisted remains, its silhouette swaying under the dim light. It was humanoid but taller, with elongated limbs and skin that shimmered with a faint, silvery sheen. Blood, dark and thick, seeped from a gash along its forehead. John leveled the rifle. "Stay where you are." The being's eyes met his, and John's heart lurched. Its gaze was unmistakably intelligent, filled with fear and desperation. The creature stumbled forward, collapsing onto its knees. Its voice was raspy, a mix of clicks and guttural tones. "Help me," it said, the words heavily accented but clear. John hesitated. His training screamed at him to retreat, to report the sighting and let someone else handle it. But the thing was bleeding, shivering. Its eyes were too human. "Who are you?" John asked, his voice firm but not unkind. The being's chest heaved, each breath a struggle. "They are coming. They seek." It raised a shaking hand, revealing a small, palm-sized device. It pulsed with a soft blue light, emitting a rhythmic beep. Hide it." John didn't move. "What is it?" "Tracker," the being gasped. "They follow it." Before John could ask more, the alien slumped forward, its eyes rolling back. John crouched beside it, feeling for a pulse. There was none. The being was dead, its hand still clutching the device. John pried the device free, its surface warm against his skin. The beeping quickened, the sound echoing in the stillness. Whatever was coming, it was getting closer. A sudden roar split the air, louder and closer than before. John's head snapped up, and his gut clenched. Beyond the ridge, 3 more ships streaked through the night sky, their dark hulls catching the moonlight. They landed in a triangle formation, hissing as they settled into the earth. John dropped to his stomach, concealing himself in the underbrush. From each ship, armored figures emerged, tall, imposing, and armed to the teeth. Their armor was black, segmented, and reflective, like a swarm of mechanical insects. Each carried a weapon that glowed with a sickly green light. One of them barked orders in a guttural language, the words harsh and clipped. They spread out, fanning through the trees with military precision. John's mind raced, processing every detail. They were searching, not just aimlessly but systematically. One of them held a scanner, its screen flashing with lines of alien text. The scanner emitted a pulse, and the device in John's hand responded with a sharper beep. The hunter's head snapped up, its dark eyes narrowing as it scanned the area. John's pulse hammered in his ears. They were tracking the signal. Tracking him. He shoved the device into his pocket, slinking backward through the underbrush. The hunters moved closer, their boots crushing twigs and leaves, their weapons raised. John's heart pounded, every nerve screaming at him to run. But he knew better. Running made noise. Running made you a target. John slipped through the trees, each step calculated, each breath controlled. He moved in a wide arc, keeping low and out of sight. The hunters' voices echoed behind him, growing distant. They were following the wrong direction. For now. Back at the cabin, John bolted the door and secured the windows. He dumped the device onto the table, its beeping insistent and urgent. Grabbing a screwdriver, he pried open the casing, revealing a tangled mess of wires and circuits. The device pulsed faster, the light intensifying. "Damn it," John muttered, sweat slicking his brow. Whatever this thing was, it was calling to them. He considered smashing it, but something stopped him. What if it was more than just a tracker? What if it was a warning, a beacon, a call for help? His eyes flicked to the rack of weapons. This wasn't a random encounter. They were looking for something, or someone. And now they were on his land. John pocketed a pair of grenades, strapped a combat knife to his thigh, and loaded his rifle with armor-piercing rounds. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. Outside, the forest was silent. Too silent. The hunters had stopped moving. They knew. John took one last look around the cabin, his jaw clenched. This was no ordinary mission. The rules had changed, and the enemy was nothing like he had ever faced. But he was still a soldier. Still a Green Beret. And they were on his turf. John crouched behind a thicket, his breath controlled and shallow. The night air was thick with the scent of burning ozone and crushed leaves. Through the dense underbrush, he tracked two of the hunters advancing toward his cabin. Their armor gleamed under the faint moonlight, segmented plates that moved fluidly with their bodies. Their weapons were sleek, black rifles pulsing with a sickly green light. They were speaking in their guttural language, their voices low and clipped. John couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable, coordinated, tactical. These weren't mercenaries. They were soldiers. Professional, disciplined, and hunting for blood. John's eyes swept the forest floor. His traps were in place, crude but effective. He gripped the detonator in his left hand, waiting. The hunters moved closer, their footsteps too heavy for creatures that size. They had no regard for stealth. They believed they were the apex predators here. One of them raised its scanner, the device emitting a faint, rhythmic beep that matched the signal from the device still hidden in John's cabin. The hunter's head snapped up, and John caught a glimpse of its eyes, black, depthless, utterly inhuman. The hunter barked a command, and the second one raised its weapon. John's thumb pressed down on the detonator. The forest floor erupted. A concussive blast ripped through the air, a spray of dirt, branches, and shrapnel. The nearest hunter was flung backward, its armor absorbing most of the impact but not all. It crashed against a tree, disoriented but still moving. The second hunter staggered but remained upright, its weapon swinging in a wide arc. John sprang forward, his knife drawn. In 2 strides, he was on the creature, slashing at the exposed joints between its armor plates. The hunter roared, its arms swinging back, catching John across the chest. The blow sent him flying, his back slamming into a tree trunk. Pain lanced through him, but John rolled to his feet, the knife still clenched in his fist. The hunter lunged, its gauntlet fist aiming for John's head. John ducked, pivoting behind the creature, and drove the knife into a gap beneath its arm. The blade sank deep, meeting resistance. Dark, viscous blood oozed over his hand. The hunter howled, its elbow snapping back, catching John in the ribs. He felt something crack, pain exploding through his torso. But he held on, twisting the knife deeper until the creature's struggles weakened. With a final, desperate jerk, the hunter collapsed, twitching, its breathing labored and ragged. John yanked the knife free, his chest heaving. The second hunter, the one flung by the blast, was regaining its footing. Its visor was shattered, exposing an elongated face with slitted nostrils and a maw lined with serrated teeth. Its eyes locked onto John, and the fury in them was palpable. John didn't wait. He sprinted toward the cabin, lungs burning, legs pumping. The ground shook as the hunter gave chase, its heavy boots thundering behind him. John dove through the open window, rolling across the floor and coming up with the rifle in hand. The hunter charged through the doorway, its massive frame filling the entrance. John squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked, spitting rounds that punched into the hunter's chest. The first few ricocheted off the armor, but John adjusted his aim, targeting the exposed joints. The bullets found their mark, splintering armor and drawing black blood. The hunter staggered but kept coming. It raised its weapon, a pulsing barrel that glowed with green energy. John hurled himself to the side as a blast of plasma incinerated the wall where he'd just stood. The air reeked of scorched wood and molten metal. John rolled to his feet, his hand closing around the device on the table. The blue light was still flashing, the beeping now frantic louder, as if in response to the chaos. The hunter's gaze locked onto the device, its expression twisting with recognition. John's mind raced. If the device was what they were after, he could use it. He grabbed it and sprinted for the back door, shoving the device into his pack. The hunter roared, barreling through the remains of the wall. Wood splintered and shattered as the creature charged. John leaped through the back door, hitting the ground and rolling to his feet. The forest loomed around him, dark and endless, every shadow a potential threat. The hunter was close, too close. John sprinted down the slope, weaving between trees, the heavy footfalls thundering behind him. He veered right, toward a narrow ravine choked with fallen logs and thorny underbrush. The perfect choke point. John slid down the incline, dirt and rocks scraping his palms. The hunter followed, crashing through the trees, its weapon glowing with charged plasma. John ducked behind a fallen log, his hands moving quickly, setting up the last of his traps. The hunter's shadow loomed above him, its plasma weapon crackling to life. John's hand closed around a grenade. He pulled the pin and tossed it over the log. The grenade detonated mid-air, a concussive blast that sent the hunter sprawling backward. John rose, rifle up, and fired a burst of rounds into the exposed sections of the hunter's armor. Dark blood sprayed the trees. The hunter slumped against a boulder, its breathing ragged, eyes half-lidded. John stepped forward, knife drawn, when a flash of movement caught his eye. A second figure emerged from the trees, stumbling, arms raised in a gesture of surrender. It was another alien, but not one of the hunters. This one was smaller, thinner, with skin a dull, mottled gray. Its eyes were large, almost insectoid, and filled with terror. "Wait!" the newcomer gasped, its voice shaking. "Don't shoot." John's jaw clenched, the knife still poised. "You're with them." "No," the alien said, its gaze darting to the dying hunter. "They hunt me too." John's eyes narrowed. "Why?" The alien swallowed, its elongated fingers trembling. "I'm Zaruk. I know why they're here. And I know what they're looking for." John glanced at the fallen hunter, then back to Zaruk. "Talk. Fast." Zaruk licked his thin lips, glancing nervously at the forest around them. "They're not bounty hunters. They're executioners. Sent to eliminate a fugitive hiding on Earth." "A fugitive?" John's mind reeled. "You." Zaruk shook his head. "Not me. A human. A scientist named Dr. Emery Kale. He discovered something. Something the Empire doesn't want anyone to know." John's pulse quickened. What kind of something? Zaruk took a shaky breath. A way to disrupt their control. Their weapons, their ships, everything. It's a code that can cripple them. John's gaze dropped to the device in his pack, its blue light still blinking rhythmically. And that? Zaruk nodded, eyes haunted. It's broadcasting the signal that drew them here. As long as it's active, they'll keep coming. A howl echoed through the forest, a sound that made the hairs on John's neck rise. It was the other hunters, regrouping, closing in. Zaruk's eyes widened. We have to move. Now. John tightened his grip on the rifle, every nerve screaming at him to run. But running meant abandoning his home, his ground. And something in Zaruk's eyes told him there was more to this story. Where's the scientist? John asked, voice steely. Zaruk hesitated, glancing toward the mountain ridge. Hidden. But they're closing in on him too. John's jaw clenched. The hunters were regrouping, and the device was still broadcasting. He had a choice, run or fight. But for a Green Beret, there was never really a choice. Then we'd better make sure they don't get to him first, John said, shoving the device into his pack and cocking his rifle. Zaruk nodded, relief and fear mingling in his gaze. You don't know what you're up against. John's eyes narrowed, the familiar burn of adrenaline coursing through his veins. Neither do they. The air inside the cabin was heavy with the scent of sweat and burnt metal. John pressed a damp cloth to his bruised ribs, grimacing as the ache radiated through his chest. Across the room, Zaruk knelt beside the dismantled tracker, his elongated fingers deftly sifting through the tangled mess of wires and circuitry. The blue light no longer pulsed, but its silence was far from reassuring. That thing's a beacon, John said, eyes fixed on Zaruk. How do we kill it without drawing more of them here? Zaruk's dark eyes flicked up, his brow furrowing. It's not that simple. The device isn't just a tracker. It's a signal booster, an amplifier. Even if we disable it, the last signal it sent will keep transmitting, a ghost signal. John tossed the blood-soaked cloth aside, his jaw clenched. Then we use it to our advantage. Zaruk frowned, but John was already on his feet, moving to the wooden table where his gear lay spread out. We make them think it's still active, John said, grabbing a length of wire and a remote detonator. If they're following the signal, we can lead them where we want. Zaruk's mandibles twitched, a gesture John had come to recognize as uncertainty. You're suggesting a decoy? John nodded, his mind already forming a plan. You said they were hunting Dr. Kale. They don't know he's not here. If we set up a trap, we can thin their numbers. Zaruk rose to his full, imposing height, the tips of his fingers twitching. You're assuming we can fool them. These are enforcers, Carson. Not grunts. They're the Empire's elite. Good, John said, grabbing a combat knife and tucking it into his boot. Then they'll expect a fight. The plan was simple, but the execution would be anything but. They worked in silence, the only sounds the metallic clicks of Zaruk assembling the decoy and John setting up the perimeter traps. The cabin became a labyrinth of explosives, tripwires, and booby traps, each placed with precise military precision. Zaruk rigged the decoy to emit a constant pulse, mimicking the device's original signal. It was crude, but with enough distance and the right bait, it would serve its purpose. They positioned it inside a hollowed-out log near the edge of the ravine, surrounded by tripwires and concealed explosives. John crouched beside Zaruk, their eyes fixed on the dark expanse of forest. The wind rustled the branches, the night air colder now, sharper. They'll come in from the east, John said, voice low. That's where I spotted the last dropship. Zaruk nodded, his eyes scanning the trees. They'll move in pairs. Standard sweep formation. One on point, one on cover. John's jaw tightened. Then we hit the point man first. They settled into their positions, John behind a boulder with a clear line of sight to the decoy, Zaruk in the canopy above, his lithe frame barely visible among the leaves. Time crawled, each second a hammer pounding against John's skull. His finger rested lightly on the detonator, his breath steady and controlled. Then the forest shifted. A soft rustling. The crunch of boots over leaves. Shadows moved through the trees, tall, armored figures advancing in formation. 2 hunters moved ahead of the others, their plasma rifles sweeping left and right. Their visors glowed a faint green, casting eerie halos against the trees. The decoy's pulse echoed in the air, a soft, rhythmic beep. The lead hunter's scanner chirped, and it pointed toward the hollowed log. John's thumb hovered over the detonator. Not yet. They had to get closer. The lead hunter approached the log, its rifle raised, the barrel emitting a low hum. The second hunter hung back, scanning the perimeter, visor flickering as it analyzed the surroundings. Closer. Closer. John exhaled slowly, his finger depressing the detonator. The ground erupted in a blinding flash of light and sound. The explosion tore through the trees, a fireball consuming the lead hunter and sending the second stumbling backward, armor blackened and cracked. Smoke billowed, the acrid scent of burning flesh filling the air. Before the second hunter could recover, Zaruk dropped from the canopy, his blade flashing. He landed on the hunter's back, the impact driving the alien to its knees. Zaruk's knife plunged down, slicing through a vulnerable joint beneath the helmet. Black blood sprayed, and the hunter convulsed, collapsing under Zaruk's weight. John was already moving, rifle raised, eyes scanning the trees. The explosion would draw the others. The remaining hunters would be on high alert now. Zaruk rose, chest heaving, dark blood splattered across his gray skin. 2 down, he said, wiping his blade on the grass. 3 to go. John didn't respond. He was listening, his ears straining against the night. The forest had gone silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that meant the enemy was regrouping, recalibrating. They're not going to take the bait again, Zaruk said, his mandibles twitching. They'll know we're targeting the signal now. John's jaw flexed. Good. Let them come. But the enforcers didn't come. Not directly. The first blast came from the west, a concentrated plasma bolt that struck the boulder John had just vacated. It shattered, chunks of rock spraying through the air. John dove for cover, rolling behind a fallen log as another blast seared the air above him. They're flanking, Zaruk shouted, his voice echoing through the chaos. John's mind raced. They were adapting, coordinating. Instead of charging in, they were using suppressive fire, forcing John and Zaruk into a defensive position. A second plasma bolt sizzled through the air, grazing Zaruk's shoulder. He grunted, clutching the wound, dark blood seeping through his fingers. John's eyes darted to the left, catching a glimpse of a hunter moving through the trees, plasma rifle trained on Zaruk. Without thinking, John raised his rifle and fired. The shot struck the hunter in the throat, the armor shattering. The alien staggered, clawing at its neck, and fell. A blast of plasma struck the log, and John was thrown backward, his vision swimming. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked from his lungs. The world spun, and when it cleared, he saw the last 2 hunters advancing, their visors glowing like the eyes of death. John rolled onto his back, rifle raised. The first hunter fired, and John twisted, the plasma bolt searing past his ear. Before he could recover, the second hunter was on him, its gauntlet slamming into John's chest. The impact drove the air from his lungs, and he gasped, his vision blurring. The hunter raised its rifle, the barrel aimed directly at John's head. A blur of motion. Zaruk crashed into the hunter from the side, both of them tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs and blades. The second hunter hesitated, its weapon swinging toward Zaruk, and that was all the time John needed. He lunged forward, his knife flashing as he drove it up under the second hunter's jaw. The blade punched through the alien's skull, and it collapsed without a sound. Zaruk and the remaining hunter rolled across the ground, fists and blades flashing. The hunter was stronger, its armor thicker, but Zaruk was faster, more desperate. He ducked a punch, drove his knife into the hunter's exposed neck, and twisted. The hunter went still. Zaruk fell back, breathing hard, blood dripping from a gash across his forehead. John knelt beside him, his own chest heaving. "They're down," John said, scanning the trees. But they'll send more. That device was a beacon, and now they know where we are. Zaruk wiped blood from his eyes, his gaze fierce. Then we move now. Before they regroup. John rose, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Where's Kale? Zaruk pointed toward the mountain ridge, eyes dark and haunted. If he's still alive, that's where they'll go next. John nodded, jaw set. The night was far from over. And the real hunt had only just begun. The wind howled through the mountain pass, carrying with it the scent of impending rain. John pressed forward, muscles aching, each step a reminder of the blows he'd taken. Zaruk moved beside him, his gait uneven, one hand pressed against the bleeding gash along his ribs. The climb was steep, the rocky terrain unforgiving, but neither could afford to slow down. Behind them, the forest smoldered, smoke rising in dark plumes against the night sky. The wreckage of the last hunter still smoldered in the clearing below, a grim marker of their battle. But John knew that was only the beginning. The enforcers had been a vanguard. The real strike force was still out there, closing in. How much further? John asked, his voice tight. Zaruk's breaths were ragged, his skin slick with sweat. Not far. Kale's bunker is concealed beneath the old mining facility. If he's still alive, he'll be underground. John grunted, adjusting the straps of his pack. The decoy device still pulsed inside, the blue light faint but persistent. Every second it remained active was a risk, but without it, they had no way of drawing off the remaining hunters. A crack echoed through the ravine, sharp and metallic. John dropped to a crouch, rifle raised. Zaruk fell in beside him, eyes scanning the ridgeline. There, Zaruk whispered, pointing. John's gaze followed. A shadow moved among the rocks, a hulking figure outlined against the dark sky. Another enforcer, larger than the others, its armor thicker, a glowing insignia branded across its chest. It held a weapon that pulsed with a sinister green light, the barrel almost as long as John's leg. They brought a juggernaut, Zaruk muttered, his expression grim. John's jaw clenched. A juggernaut was a walking fortress, heavily armored, heavily armed, and nearly indestructible. Taking it down head-on would be suicide. Stay low, John said, slipping behind a boulder. We go around. They edged along the cliffside, every muscle tense, every breath held. The juggernaut's visor scanned the valley below, its weapon sweeping in slow, deliberate arcs. Each step it took sent vibrations through the ground, the heavy thud of its boots a constant reminder of its presence. John's eyes flicked to the ridge. The entrance to the old mining facility was just ahead, a rusted hatch half buried under a mound of rocks. If they could reach it without drawing the juggernaut's attention. A shout echoed behind them, guttural, angry. The juggernaut had seen them. Run! John barked, grabbing Zaruk's arm and yanking him forward. They sprinted toward the hatch as the juggernaut raised its weapon. A blast of plasma shot past them, incinerating the boulder they'd just vacated. Shards of rock and molten metal flew in every direction, and John threw himself down, dragging Zaruk with him. Get up! John snarled, hauling Zaruk to his feet. Another blast seared the air, scorching the ground inches from John's boot. The heat was blistering, a white-hot flash that singed his exposed skin. The hatch loomed ahead, a rusted circle half obscured by debris. John dropped to his knees, shoving rocks aside, fingers scrabbling for the latch. Zaruk fired behind them, his pistol spitting blue plasma bolts at the juggernaut. The hulking enforcer barely flinched. It kept advancing, each step deliberate, each blast from its weapon shaking the ground. John found the latch and wrenched it open. Inside. Zaruk dove through the opening, and John followed, yanking the hatch shut just as another blast struck the hillside. The impact reverberated through the tunnel, sending dust raining down from the ceiling. The air inside was stale and cold, the walls lined with corroded metal and old mining equipment. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. John pushed himself to his feet, panting, every muscle throbbing. Where's Kale? Zaruk nodded down the corridor. Deeper in. He built a lab in the central chamber. But if the enforcers know he's here, A sudden, echoing clang resounded through the tunnel. The juggernaut was pounding on the hatch, each strike sending shudders through the metal. It wouldn't hold for long. "Move," John said, shoving Zaruk forward. They raced down the corridor, the tunnel walls vibrating with each impact from above. Dust fell in thick clouds, stinging John's eyes. The sound of the juggernaut's weapon grew louder, each blast a dull, concussive roar. They rounded a corner and came upon a reinforced door. It was sealed shut, a keypad embedded in the wall beside it. Zaruk rushed forward, his fingers flying over the keys. The door creaked, gears grinding as it slid open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with computer terminals, data consoles, and a massive central machine humming with power. And in the center of it all stood Dr. Emery Cale.